In the Huddle was created to give student athletes, parents, and coaches an inside look at the journey through US college sport and all that comes with it. The demands, the experiences, the excitement, and the opportunities available to our student athletes from around the world. Study and Play USA facilitates a comprehensive, customised approach for student athletes and families for their whole journey, from their high school preparation years right through to US college graduation. Okay, here we go. This episode of In the Huddle is a great listen for all soccer, football players and families. I'm joined by my colleague Claire Mulligan, herself a former high-level US college football recruit and a US college women's soccer coach. And together we're going to tackle, pardon the pun, we're going to tackle recruiting in general, the nuances of NCAA Division III and how that relates to other divisions, specifically soccer as a whole, along with some tips for Australian soccer players regarding the recruiting process. So pop on your headphones and enjoy this episode.
Thanks, Chris. So here I am today speaking with a lovely coach who has agreed to speak with us in Denver on a recruiting trip. And I'm going to introduce him and list out a bunch of his amazing accomplishments before getting started. So this is Coach Timmy McCormack from Piedmont University, a Division III university in Georgia. This is his 5th season as Piedmont University's head women's soccer coach. This is his 13th season coaching overall. Piedmont's record in the last 5 years is 69, 23, and 11. He's a USA South Coach of the Year 2021. He led Piedmont University to an undefeated season in his first year as head coach. Since 2017, he has had 31 all-conference players. He's also the member of various camp staffs at the University of Notre Dame, Texas A&M University, and Maryville. Welcome, Coach Timmy McCormack.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome to have you, and yeah, we really appreciate your time. And where are you at the moment? You're over in recruiting on the other side of the country.
Denver, Colorado. So 2 hours time difference from my typical Eastern time zone, but still many hours difference from your time zone. So
yeah, no, it's perfect time of day for us here. So this works well. So we appreciate it. Yeah. So look, we might kick it off. There's plenty to talk about. You're our first D3 coach we've had on this podcast. And I think that's really important that we do. I think so. Probably we see you as representing, probably all Division III coaches across America, and probably not a lot of people know that are listening that there's more Division III programs than any other division. It's a very popular division in terms of what universities choose to be a part of. So without any further ado, we might just start on that note, I guess, just talking about recruiting as a whole. I think people will be interested to know your perspective.
So the first question we have is, in your opinion, what should a prospective student athlete be looking for in a coach, and what should they be asking someone like you in a Zoom meeting? This would be after you have shown interest in them.
Okay. Yeah, I think the biggest thing that student athletes should look for in a coach, and the questions they should ask in the Zoom meeting, of course, kind of follow along the same lines. They should be looking for the fit that the coach gives them in the same way that the school, the program fits them as well too. So there a lot of the questions you should ask should center around coaching philosophy, maybe asking that coach what type of formations they play, but also their general philosophy of how they play, how they attack, how they defend, what the expectations are within the program. Are there team values? Are there core values for the program? Are there core values for the athletic department? Some of the best athletic programs, whether it be women's soccer or really any of the sports here in the States, are good programs because of the athletic department, especially as well. So it really comes from the leadership of the administration all the way down through the department into the program. And typically the fit for that coach is the same in that program as it would be for the fit for the coach and the player. So if you're looking for someone who is player-centered, or has a little bit more of a style where they like to involve the players in decision-making processes in the program, you need to ask those questions of the coach. I think everyone in the process, when they go through the Zoom meetings, they're given, especially here in the States, we're kind of given a list of standard questions to ask. And they'll always ask about, what's the team culture like? What are the girls like? What's it like to be a part of the program? While they'll ask those questions, because they ask those questions and so many ask the same questions, I think the standard answers have always come from coaches that the culture is good. And I don't know many coaches that would say the culture is bad necessarily. So really a good way to do it is think of it like a job interview. And, when you're talking to the coach, think of it as more of an interview setting. Give them some situations, something that maybe happens in a team, maybe that you've played on before, or something that you've heard of at another college program or something like that. Give them a situation and ask them how they would handle that situation, or what they would do to kind of address something like that. And you'll start to see a little bit more of the philosophy that the coach has come out, because we are defined by our actions, not necessarily what we say. So I think those are really good situations for us to be able to kind of sit down and make sure that the kids that are asking questions are giving them more of a situational type of feel to it, and see if they can kind of maybe give some perspective there.
That's really good. And would it be fair to say that a young recruit who's really organized, got one of these little things in front of them with a pen and making notes as you're speaking and referring to their questions shows that they're organized, prepared, and they've got good buy-in to this process? Do those sort of things reflect well?
Yeah, I think it's really good because, anytime you're going through a process, and again, if you think of it like an interview, you're going to want to see some of that organization, especially. One of the really good touches you can put to it though, as well, too, it's easy to go on and look and find a record, or, so how they did last year as a team, or maybe to go and look at rosters and see a little bit more information about the program. So those are always good pieces to see. Well, the coaches will also know typically what their record was last year, what their roster makeup was like. So finding those little pieces that can give coaches a feel that you do know a little bit more about their program are really key as well, too. So that may be something as simple as, watching a few of the games and saying, hey, I noticed in this game that your team did this. Is that something that's typical of your program? That's a question for us that has really stood out in the recruiting process. When players will ask what type of, say, formation or style that we play, and then they'll come back and say, I noticed you didn't do that as much in this game. Is there a reason why? I love that because it shows that you're really tactically looking at the program. And usually there is a reason why. And so now we can get into a discussion that's a little bit more of a higher level discussion than just what our record was.
Yeah, I like that. And that's really good feedback, Coach. And coming back to what you said about an interview, it's really like that. You want to be prepared about the interview. You want to research the company you're applying to and interviewing with. So I think that's really good advice. And look, if we flip that from your perspective, what are you, when you're Zooming, Skyping with a potential recruit, what are you looking for in them? From your perspective?
Yeah. So again, if you think of it like an interview, one of the biggest things I pay attention to, and because, the technology that we have nowadays, especially, is just fantastic. The fact that we're able to recruit this way has given us opportunities to connect with players, not just, geographical regions that are far away from our own here in the States, but of course, internationally. And so one of the key pieces when you're visiting our campus that I'm always paying attention to is your body language. And can I tell that you're being an active listener? Because, in an interview setting, how many times do you get asked a question and you can kind of see that maybe they're not listening to the answer that you're giving them, so having kind of an engaged listening style, and maybe even, writing down key points to that answer that we've given you to a question and referencing them back and, and asking follow-up questions. That shows that you're engaged in the conversation, you're an active listener, and then your body language as well, too. If you're asking a question, reading off of that sheet, and I'm going to answer, and your eyes are darting away because you're looking at your sheet and you're trying to prepare for the next question. I think we all have that nervousness about us that when we, if we meet someone for the first time, you're trying to make sure you say your name and not their name, and have that awkward meeting moment, type of thing. So we understand those pieces for sure. And it's a little bit nerve wracking, as a 16, 17, 18-year-old to have a conversation with someone who's maybe twice your age running a soccer program you want to play for. So we understand those pieces. We'll understand the nervousness, but your body language and whether or not you can show us that you're actively engaged in the conversation are really, really key pieces on a Zoom in the same way in which they would be on a visit.
Yeah, that's a good point. And look, I was going to ask you what are some of the red flags, I guess, that you look for, and you've touched on those there really well. I find that, it's really interesting. I've got to tell you, I have to actually tell you a very funny story. In our early part of our establishment, we did prep a young guy who's very likable, a bit of a larrikin, but very likable. He showed up to his first Zoom with a coach, and I got an email from the coach the next day saying, "Hey, is it normal for your recruits to show up with no shirt on eating McDonald's?" And I said, well, absolutely not. And so, there were some words discussed with that young recruit, and as I said, very likable. He took it very well, and he progressed to his next meeting a couple of days later with another coach. And the next day, because it's not that common for me to get a response or an email from a coach to say, "Hey, this was a great meeting." I will get that quite a bit, and we will get that a bit. But twice in 2 weeks, I heard from a coach regarding this one young lad, and the next coach was sent me an email. I said, "I've got to say that is the most impressive young man I've ever recruited. He showed up with a suit and tie," and so he took the advice very well.
Yeah.
I thought you may have seen some things over the years that might resonate.
Well, you mentioned the red flag, column, and that would definitely fit into that red flag column, I would say, for sure. But, and I think that's also too, the biggest red flag that pops out to me in any conversation, whether it be a Zoom or a phone call or email or anything like that, is always the genuine interest column. Are you being genuine in the interest in the program? And then, of course, the red flag pops up if there's a lack of genuine interest. We understand that, it's tough. You want to have a lot of conversations with a lot of coaches. But if you just know from the start that it's not going to be a good fit for you, save yourself time and don't have the conversation, would be the biggest thing that I would say.
Appreciate it. And look, just switching a bit, I guess, if we go back, obviously if you're getting to a Zoom with a recruit, in order to do that, you've definitely watched some highlight video at that point, which has obviously piqued your interest, and then you've progressed to a Zoom. So when you're looking at a video, have you as a coach got some sort of non-negotiables that you're looking for? And do you think just in coaches in general across all sports, are there non-negotiables that you want to see in a video?
Yeah, so it's probably a lot to do with just our general attention span as human beings. Coaches are going to receive a lot of emails with a lot of video links to watch a lot of different film clips for players as they go through the year in the cycle recruiting. In the same way, if you think of it in the sense of as an interview process, you need to have something that's going to stand out. And one of the best things you can have is the ease of access to the video. So don't bury your link, deep down below at the end of the email, somewhere in that top paragraph, because, some coaches may not read past that top paragraph. So put that high up there. YouTubes and easy access, are the best ways to put your video out. If it's something where you have to log in or get permission or, wait for an email to come back, you're going to lose the interest right away. You're making a sale, you're selling yourself, as far as how you are as a player to the college program and trying to give them, a good idea of what you bring to the table. And it's really hard to make that sale if you can't get past the initial conversation, especially too. The other non-negotiables that I think come into it as well are the clarity of the video for sure. How easy is it for us to spot you? You can tell us in the email, I wear, jersey number 5 and I'm in yellow and I play in this position. But even on your video, if there's a way that you can do it where, prior to you receiving the ball, you put a little circle around you, stop the video, put a circle around you, and then it helps us track that in the video much easier. And there's all sorts of video editing tools. I'd love to tell you that I have experience in that more than the kids do probably, but they could probably sit and do it on their phone or their tablet, quicker than I could get back to their email probably. So, but the clarity for sure and how easy it is for us to find you actually on the video. And then always consider the length of the video. You don't want to give a 10-second clip only, probably. You want to put a few of those together, but you don't need to put, a 15-20 minute video, probably together. Some coaches will prefer a longer setting of video. So they may want to see a half, give them the option, so if you create a highlight video, but you've got a full game, include that link too as well. And then that way you're giving yourself more of an opportunity. Again, think of that interview process. You want your resume to be in the resume pile that has the least amount of things kind of marked against it. So if a coach is only looking at full length videos, then give them that option too as well. That way your resume is in the right pile, so those are just some of those pieces for sure. And there's plenty of video tips that are out there, I'm sure, that would help them as far as the editing process. The soundtrack won't make a large difference to most, but I do enjoy a good tune, for sure. So pick me something good that, that I can Shazam, and put into my playlist of myself. So
what's the favorite at the moment? What's the flavor of the moment?
I'll be honest with you, I haven't gotten a good tune on a highlight video in quite some time. So that might be a challenge out there. To most, that if I told them what I would put on, it'd probably be something from the 1990s that they wouldn't even know, or they weren't born when it was released, probably still. So, but yeah, I need some new tunes. As the kids kind of say when we're in practice and we're playing, music. If coach is on the aux, it's going to be old school music. So they try to keep me off of there as much as possible. So
I love it.
I love that. In regards to soccer specific recruiting, just moving slightly more towards soccer specifically, like what you were saying with length of the video and putting a circle around yourself and things like that. What else stands out to you for a soccer player, specifically female soccer player, in a highlight video? What would you like to see in general? What would you like to see at the beginning of the video to pique interest? Do you like introductions? Can you include a bit of information about what you'd like to see?
Yeah, I think a player introduction is a great thing. And especially because it allows, if you think about a highlight video or just film in general for soccer, it's a large field sport. So different than say like a basketball here in the States, where it's going to be a little bit clearer to be able to see somebody's face. You may not be able to see that. So a player intro is a really good thing to add in for a soccer highlight video. If there's something on there that they feel like they can add in as far as, athletic measurement data or something like that as well too, is always kind of enjoyable, to be able to know exactly what some of the measurables are. And then also too, I would tell you, the level helps to be able to see in the video, and then how the player competes against the level. It's difficult to really kind of determine at times, because you can't quite tell how fast the competition is that maybe somebody's outrunning. But if you're always running past the competition, we at least know that you're competing well against that level, so it allows us to be able to see some of those pieces for sure. But a player intro is always a great thing. And then contact info in the video is never a bad thing to add in. You can put it in your email, you can put it, in the initial reach out, but having it in the video is also great, because if you pop it on social media, now somebody who clicks on it from a Twitter or an Instagram, they can also now find your contact info right away as well too. And you want to make yourself as available as possible. It's always a good idea in the contact info, especially too, have an email that's separate maybe from your personal email. Your personal email may have some kind of, odd nickname, thrown into the title or whatever. So creating a soccer specific one's good. And it also kind of helps, put everything into the right column for you. So, when an email pops through on that it's kind of more of a business email. So it allows, it kind of sets the tone. Coach, similar, kind of what we're talking about earlier with coaches, the idea of, sharing the videos and some of the red flags with Zoom and things like that. It helps put the kid in a professional setting, knowing that if it comes to that email, it's soccer related and it's based on my recruitment.
Amazing. This is really good information for anyone from any sport working with us to really use. So this is great. Love it. Very excited so far.
Great.
I have another
Great.
question from our chats that we had last time that we spoke on Zoom. You were saying to me that there's been a couple of Division I players who have transferred to your team. Can you talk a bit more about why someone may transfer from a Division I soccer program to your soccer program?
Yeah, so there's many reasons I think that go into that. Every player's story is so individualized. And that's one of the things that I really thrive on as a coach. And I absolutely love to find out more about our kids as far as their individual stories. We've had a large program, and there are probably lots of programs around the country that have large rosters, and it's hard to get to know every player, but it's one of the things that I take a great deal of joy in, because every player's journey is so different. So I think sometimes the reasons have a lot to do with what their experience has been like at that school. That may not just be Division I, but it also could be Division II or NAIA, transferring to a Division III. I think the misconception that probably is out there is that player could not play at that level and had to transfer down in order to play. That's actually not the case in most of the situations that we come across. Some of the players who have transferred into our program, and then the programs that we've been around as well too, have been able to play at that level, and just are looking for a different experience. It may not have been exactly what they were looking for when they're going through. The recruiting process is an extremely difficult process. If you think about it, you basically have a situation coming up where you maybe spend about 8 months getting to know somebody, and then you basically move in with them for 4 years. That's a tough thing to ask, So, and I think the other part of it too, from the coaching perspective, we're going to probably see a player a maximum of say 3 to 5 times, especially with how well we recruit all over the country. We're going to see them play more in the first week that they play for us than we will in the entire recruiting process. So that's probably one of the biggest reasons, honestly, is that it's really hard to evaluate someone, in just 3 to 5 sessions. Whereas if I have a full season for them, we collect so much data and so much information that by the end of that season or the end of their first 2 years, especially, we'll be able to tell you almost everything about yourself, probably some stuff you didn't want to know about yourself as a player, quite honestly. So, and then I think the other part of it too, for me is, in my personal experience as a player, the reputation has a lot to do with it as far as why players are comfortable, making that choice to say change into a program, especially if they know, myself as a coach. I transferred twice. I transferred once to a different school and ended up transferring back to the same school that I started at. That was kind of how my journey went. And it was for a variety of different reasons. And a large part of it was actually not really based on soccer. It was more just everything else floating around with academics and family and things like that.
Really good to know. We can touch more on that a bit later with the transferring and the data collection. The other question I had for this kind of section of soccer specific questions was, if there's a year 9, 10, or 11, year 11 soccer player listening to the podcast, male or female, starting the process of the U.S. college pathway in grade 9 or grade 10 or grade 11, what would you suggest them to do in order to maximize their scholarship opportunities?
Well, the biggest thing that we tell kids here in the States is make sure that you're committed to your academics. Your academic performance will open up more doors than it will shut. If they're really good grades, obviously. Coaches love players with good academic commitment and good academic scores. So that's the first and foremost thing that I would say. The second thing that I would say is if they really want to improve their chances at earning scholarship dollars for their athletic performance has to be elite. And in order to be elite at something, you have to really put a ton of time into it. I've had many a conversation with players over the years, and even as some of my own family and young nieces and nephews have gotten involved in playing as well too in different sports, the questions that I always get is, based off that is, what did you do as a player to get to the college level? And my response a lot of time is I was always practicing. I was always playing. There was probably going 4, 5, 6 days a week at times. So you really have to hone your craft in the same way in which, you commit to your academics, you have to commit to the soccer field as well too, especially. And then the other piece of it too, for me, which was really important for me in the recruiting process, was from that time on, from that 9-10 time on, I researched tons of schools throughout the country. And I spent a ton of time, researching schools, finding out more about them. I would write to the schools, for information to come back and pamphlets and profiles. I was recruited in a time where not everything was done by email. So you had to fill out these information cards by hand with paper and pen, and send them back in by mail, and then wait to get your packages back and that kind of stuff of the information. Now with the access and ease of the information that they have, I think it's probably taken for granted a little bit in the sense that maybe they think they can research down the line. But if you're doing your research when you're trying to make a decision, it's like studying for the test as you're taking it. It's really tough to do. I would say to do the research early on, because then you'll start to know a little bit more about when those opportunities do pop up. You'll know, I remember that school. I researched them a couple of years ago. They're really strong in the academic field that I'm looking for, or something like that.
That's really good, Coach. And I'm just pleased to know there's other coaches out there that got recruited back in the dark ages like me. I got recruited by fax. I got recruited by
yes, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
We wrote letters, right?
Yeah.
So
and we've sent CDs. CDs were a big deal.
I do have a good story on that, to be honest with you, because the funny thing is the coach that was at Piedmont at the time that I got recruited is a good friend of mine and is a really legendary coach in our area. And I sent him my resume by mail. He will never let anyone forget, and he will always tell the story. And if we did a video version of this podcast, people would enjoy this, I think, a little bit more, from the sense of that picture had me with a nice, big bushy head of hair and curls and locks. And he tells every coach that tells him about, I remember him because of that picture. So, but he remembered me, so.
Yeah. Oh, that's the key, right? That's all that matters.
Yeah, that's right.
That's good. We could talk for hours about funny stories, I can tell you that. But I can tell you got a lot more that you want to tell, but stories, which we'll have to do that off air some stage. But
we only got an hour,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you got places to be, right? Look, so far, as Claire said, we're loving it, because you're really verbalizing from the horse's mouth, really, at the coalface. You're a coach, college coach. You're verbalizing what we spend a large amount of our time doing here, educating families about these nuances of recruiting, and on both sides, right? I think, as a bit of a segue now, talking about the Australian recruiting landscape, it is unique. I know you largely recruit in the US for your programs, or for your program, but there are a lot of Australian soccer players on this pathway and looking to go. And I think maybe we could call it a disadvantage, but maybe just a key difference is an American girl or boy looking to play soccer, grow up really knowing what the divisions are and their differences. And there's a lot of myths. And I think particularly with this sport, where the word division means a lot, they grow up, supporting Chelsea, Man U, and that, okay, well, a division is a vertical hierarchy. It's not the case, and I think you mentioned it before or Claire did, about referencing a Division 1 player coming to Division 3. Now, anyone in Australia, most people, without knowing the system, would picture that vertically. That's a drop. That's a step down in level. That's a step down in some way. So I think, I want to get on to Division 3 in a moment and try to help the Australian students. But so I guess my point at the end of all that is that we do have a lot of people who assume, and in some cases they're right, in some cases they're not, assume that D1 is better. So what I'm curious to ask is, what would you say to an Australian soccer player starting out, maybe even listening to this podcast, trying to get their ducks in a row? What do you say to them if they're aiming for Division 1 and that's their tunnel vision?
Yeah. The thing that stuck out to me when somebody said this to me in the recruiting process was, you need to go where you are wanted, not where you want to go. If you're looking for that Division 1, if you think you have a talent to play at that quote unquote the highest level, and you don't hear back, when you reach out, sometimes depending on the NCAA rules, that may happen because of how young you are, of course. But if you're, right at the tail end of your time, and you're in an age where obviously they can contact you back and you're still not hearing anything back, you got to move on to someone else. You mentioned the idea of the structure, and it is true in our sport, especially. We think of divisions and we think of that as being a vertical structure, and it is a little bit easier to see it if you look at it from a picture of the NCAA, and then having it more of the 1, 2s, and 3s are kind of on a vertical plane, for sure, but also have a little bit of sideways look to it, because there are going to be some Division 3 programs that are going to be on the echelon that could play with a Division 2 or Division 1 program, depending on level as well too. One of the big separations, honestly, when it comes to levels, has a lot to do with resources. And what you'll find out very quickly is even in Division 1 or Division 2, there are going to be programs who struggle to outfit their players with gear, or provide experiences that players have good stories about rather than bad stories. So simple questions that you can ask in the process are something of, how do you travel? Because if you're traveling in a certain way that maybe is a cost saving measure, it tells you a lot about what the resources are in that athletic department as well as that program. So ask those questions. Where do you go and play games? If a team is going clear across the country every year to play games, there are financial resources that are at that program that allow them to give a good experience. And then typically what starts to happen is that the programs where you have a better experience tend to be better programs on the field. In the same way in which all of this is connected, your academic performance tends to have a pretty good indication of how you're going to be on the field. My dad was a military man. So he was always on us as kids to make our bed. And that never really resonated with me until I became much older in my life. And, he always said, at least if you didn't do anything right, you made your bed and you started off on the right foot today. I think that's kind of something that's, when you think about it, when you go through the process, you need the little wins as you go through the recruiting process. Well, look for the programs that want you, and really show an interest in who you are. Not that they just want you to fill a spot in a program, but why do they want you? Can they tell you something that interests you in going to that program in the same way that it would be, kind of the opposite as well too for that program itself? We're interested in players that have certain qualities that elevate the program. So would that program help elevate you as a player? What are you looking for? And that's going to vary at all 3 divisions of the NCAA. It really is.
Yeah.
I had an interesting experience a couple of weeks ago talking to someone who is just about to leave in August to go to America to play soccer. And she said that she wasn't interested in a few of the schools because they were too eager and too salesy. And I almost had a heart attack.
Yeah.
Because I said there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And it's something that, as an American and as an Australian, it's really interesting to see the differences between how people view that. So I definitely wanted to highlight that. And you proved again, it's important to focus on who wants you and what coaches can tell you what they like about you and all that sort of thing. And I think that's very, very, very valuable.
Yeah. If you ask for feedback and the feedback is general, I would say it's probably not something that they're taking a great interest in exactly who you are as a player. If they can give you some specifics and some situations and how you handle those as a player, then they're paying attention to who you are and what you're going to add to the program. And the flip side of that is we're looking for that as well as coaches. So don't go into the conversation unprepared, kind of what we were talking about earlier. Know your facts about the college, but also, know some things that are going to surprise us, and we'll understand that your interest is pretty genuine in our program.
Yeah, great advice, Coach. Really appreciate that. Again, for the same reasons I said before, it's something that we try and get across, and it's really interesting. Every now and then we will. You mentioned before, that the saying about you go where the interest is, effectively, right? You go where they want you to play. That's a key thing. People ask us all the time, what's the key? Is it location? Is it being a really nice warm climate? Is it the coach? Is it and my advice generally is somewhere where you feel integral and welcome and really wanted on that team. That is absolutely critical. And that's got nothing to do with the division. It's better to be in the program, whether that's D1, 2, or 3, where you're wanted and a crucial part of that roster and a really valued member of the roster, rather than maybe perceivably being at a better or higher division, potentially in the middle of Malibu, California, and you're sitting on your backside warming the bench and feeling kind of like a bit of a reserve and not having that overall experience, right?
Yeah. I think that, again, one of the things I heard in the recruiting process that we consistently have said to recruits, if you went to that program, you rolled your ankle, would you still be happy? If soccer was taken away, would you still have a good feeling about your choice? And if the answer is no, then although it would probably be a good spot for you soccer wise, it may not be the right fit for you as a college. And that's tough to do, because you have to make a real hard choice as an 18-year-old to make a pretty smart and mature decision that way.
And that's what was seared into my memory in grade 9, playing with a girl on my high school team on grade 12. And the coach said the exact same thing to her in the recruiting process. And she said that to us, that, the eager year 9s ready for the process. And she said the one thing to remember is, if you were to get hurt on the first day of training and the coach was to quit on the first day of training, would you still be happy? Mm-hmm. And that has forever stuck with me. And here I am all these years later doing this job and trying to impart the same thing.
Yeah. It's funny how that works. It seems like the kids almost stay the same, that way. They got to constantly be reminded. That's true.
Yeah.
Speaking of eager, I know Claire is eager to ask you a question about something that she's seen on your website that she really loves. But I've got one more just before we move on from D3. Just off the top of your head, I'm sure you could probably come up with quite a few, but let's go D3 specific just for a second. I love debusting myths, right? Or debunking myths. What are some myths about Division 3 that you'd like to, bust right now?
Yeah, well, there's a couple, probably, and it's probably the same with all 3 divisions, as well as NAIA programs as well too, in the sense that there's probably, misconceptions with all levels. With Division 3 especially, there's a thought process out there that it's the academic division of the NCAA, and it probably is, but it's not the only academic division. So you don't have to make a choice between your soccer and your academics. You don't have to sacrifice one or the other. You can get the experience of both at a Division 3 school as well as a Division 1 and Division 2 school. So it's definitely not the only academic division within the NCAA. You have to do your individual research on the institution itself for sure. The level is probably another good one as well too. With recruits who will think that the level is too low for them. The best question I always kind of ask off of that is, have you seen the level? And where have you seen it? Because if you haven't watched, then you really can't say that. And I think watching it on film is one thing for sure. But again, as we talked about earlier, it's kind of tough sometimes to know what exactly the level is like on film. So if you're visiting campuses, make sure you're visiting campus when they're playing. And you can go and watch a game in person for sure, because it allows you to be able to see, when you're right there near the action, you can feel, just how athletic or how fast or technical some of the players are, and you can really start to see, wow, this is a level that I thought, would be a little bit too low, but all of a sudden I realized it may fit me exactly. It was exactly what I went through in the recruiting process. Now, granted, I went through again before, the Google machines started up, so I didn't know all those pieces, but went and saw the level, watched the guys play, and I thought I could fit this. This would be a good fit for me. And I think it's the other piece of it too, is that you're not settling when you're choosing a Division III school. I wouldn't look at it as saying that it's kind of a backup option, because so many of the top 25, top 40 teams in the country, they're not settling when they're looking for players. They're recruiting players who are also being recruited by schools at the Division I, Division II level. So there's probably myths at all different levels. But having spent the majority of my time, especially in Division III, there for sure are some that are out there.
Yeah, I think my thought on that is, I think it's very important now, because you have a good education about the divisions and how they differ. That's important. However, there's a big part of me that kind of I'm a little bit division blind, so to speak, because my experience was Division I. But again, I'm no Google, and I just went there because it was an extremely good tennis program for me, my background. Yeah. And that's seemed to be where a lot of guys from my part of the world was tending to go to that particular university. I didn't even know I was in Division I. I didn't even know there were divisions. All I knew, I was going to America and got this amazing opportunity. And so that's my mentality with divisions, although our role is to educate. So you've played your role in that, just talking now. That's really helpful. So really appreciate it. And I know you're eager to ask this next question, Claire. Go for it.
The thing I wanted to add to that is I feel like there should be a bumper sticker or something that says Division III is not settling. You are not settling for anything.
Yep, absolutely.
NAIA, JUCO, anything, like you are not settling. It's the right fit. And we talk a lot about that. So my last question, the one I'm most excited to ask, is when we talked on Zoom, as well as what I have seen in your website, which I'm sure lots of recruits have also seen on your website, you have a lot of data about your individual player statistics, your team statistics, and I know you have obviously personal records of things that are not on your website with the data that you collect for your team. Can you touch a bit on why you collect all the data and how you rank your players and how that affects performance?
Yeah, so as coaches, we learn from the greatest in the country and the greatest in the game. And when I started getting involved in women's college soccer, especially early on in my career, I went to a lot of the people in that section of our game here in the States that were some of the best in the country. And seeing some of the tools that they had created to allow them to kind of analyze their program, it allowed me to see we could do the same thing, in our program. And so over time, we've kind of taken some of the same models that they've had and refined them to fit our program specifically. And I've been a student of a lot of the analytics for sure, for many years. I think it helps provides feedback to a generation that is absolutely hungry for feedback for sure. And so we track pretty much everything you do in training, whether it be passing percentages or 1v1 battles won or something like that, that'll give us a little bit of an indicator of how you've done throughout that practice. We'll also track a lot of measurement data when it comes to athletic ability. Sometimes it's sprint testing, sometimes it's fitness testing for sure. But also strength data, power, as opposed, measured from jumping and things like that. Some of the strength conditioning pieces for sure within our program that are measured that way. And then we also will take a look at, some of the competitiveness that you have as a player. So, we track everything when it comes to passing percentages and things like that. Of course, we're going to track who wins and who scores goals. And it never really seems to fail that the folks who score a lot of goals in training tend to score a lot of goals in games. And it helps also to provide a competitive element within our practices, that our young ladies that compete in the program know that they're going to see just how they're doing in amongst their peers. Sometimes that can be a little rough because, if you feel like you had a bad day and the data bears it out, well, that's a tough day for sure. But it also tells you exactly where you stand in amongst our program. It paints the pictures for sure that we know the players are looking for, to know exactly where they stand. And again, we rank them in a variety of categories and in kind of an athletic, a technical, and a tactical arena as much as possible to give them a picture. So it is for sure complex. Claire, as I kind of showed you when we went through some of those pieces, for sure. It is not all mine. As they always say, coaches are great thieves, and steal from other great coaches and then take and modify it based off of, what they're looking for. One of the best things that we've done in the last couple of years has been to add data from player questionnaire feedback too as well. So players will give us feedback on not only how the intensity of the training session was, but they will also give us feedback on several key measurement points. So the pieces of maybe how they slept the night before, how much energy they have, it all goes into an algorithm in an app, and spits out a score of how they are. And luckily for me is, someone who's gotten older, it's color coded. So it's easy for me to know if somebody's in the red for 2 or 3 days that we need to make sure we adjust something in their individual training plan. And we do that even as something as simply as when we look at the minutes that our players are playing, from game to game. And we have a big Excel spreadsheet that's kept on our Google Drive. And when we see someone getting into that red or has been in the orange or the yellow for a little while, we'll try to find them, rest as we go through the season. I think it's absolutely contributed to the winning of championships for sure, because you're able to see it from a little bit more of an analytical eye. And it's also, either reaffirmed or it's given us something to think about when it comes to playing time and players, maybe that are not sticking out to us, but the data shows that they could probably have a pretty good effect on the game. And, what do you know if we play that player more and they end up being successful for the team? So it's a really good way to be objective as a coach, because we're all human beings and have that subjective problem sometimes of a little bit of a bias or just don't see it. So it allows for the players to really feel like they have as fair a shot as possible at playing within the program. And again, it's come from coaches much smarter than I, but I've been very thankful to have had the opportunity to steal away their great tactics for sure.
Well, I'm so happy with that answer and music to my ears. And like I said, Chris and I used to be coaches, so hearing anything having to do with coaching mentality, data collection, all that kind of stuff, we just absolutely love. And I'm sure Chris and I can both agree that you are a phenomenal coach and that anyone would be lucky to play at your program.
Well, we really appreciate the exposure for sure. It's a program that has been here long before me, that has been very successful before me. And I'm very excited to be a part of it for sure, as well as Division III and in our country as well too, and just the way we've been able to offer opportunities over the years. For sure, we're excited about partnering with Australia and getting some international players on over in the right fits.
Yeah, that's great to hear, Timmy, and we'll certainly book you in for our planned trip coming up in next year, and we'll swing past and say hello. So it'll be good to talk to you and see you on your home deck. But I know it's getting late, or very late already where you are in Denver. So I might just leave you with the very final comment, if you've got one, and putting you on the spot here. Just generic advice for, you got a young girl somewhere here in Australia listening to this. She's a freshman in high school. She's heard about this idea through a friend at a club, and she doesn't know much about it yet. And then she's considering it. going along the pathway? What some parting advice for a girl like that?
I think the best philosophy that I could share would be, if you really want to make it at the highest level, you have to be intrinsically motivated. It has to be something that you're committed to, that you want to do for yourself and not anybody else. But that has to do with anything in life. When you start a new exercise routine or gym plan or lifting regimen, it has to be what you want to do and for yourself and not for anybody else, because you'll stick to it. And I think not to date myself too much, as we've already done through most of the conversation, but I found out about the college process in a magazine that came to me by mail, that was a sports specific soccer magazine, and on one of the pages it had right on the bottom, want to play college soccer, and it had a few steps listed, and one of the biggest steps was, of course, researching the schools, and finding out more information. There is so much information available to players nowadays. They can go online and see almost anything at their fingertips, and probably could be a little bit more information overload and feel a little bit overwhelming at times. But if you're intrinsically motivated, if you want to do it for yourself, especially too, if it's something you're really interested in doing, then you have the best shot of anybody to make it.
That's I'm not gonna say any more, mate. I think that's a really good way to finish, and really appreciate it. And very, very well said. So, Coach, it's been a pleasure. We might have to do it again sometime. As I said, maybe we do one in person next time.
You got it. Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. And you guys are doing a great job, great service for the young athletes over there in Australia. So we are excited to help in any way we can.
Amazing.
Much appreciated. Thanks,
Thank
mate.
you.